What a great representation we have here this evening, and great diversity as well. And again, know many of you and your organisations, and look forward to getting to know many more of you, and indeed your organisations as well. So again, as Anne had said, I am going to share my screen. I have a couple of slides which I hope you can see, and basically these are just really going to, I suppose, speak to the programme, some of the main points within the programme, obviously the focus of the programme, because that is key, and then obviously in terms of housekeeping, closing dates, programme requirements and so on. And then obviously at the end we will take questions. And obviously, if we're not able to deal with your question, we'll take a note of it, and I'll come back to you tomorrow or as early as possible. And if we don't get to all of the questions, again, we'll ask them to be submitted in, and we will respond to them as quickly and as comprehensively as we can. Okay, so again, very welcome. We're here to speak about the COVID-19 Emergency Fund, which is in its second round or second call, and it is currently open for applications. And again, to note that the applications and the programme that we are administering is for the Galway City Administrative Area only. I note one group made a reference to being based possibly in the county, in the Mulcullen area. So again, to note, what we're speaking about here are applications for projects that are within the city, and that's within the city area as well. Okay, so just in terms of the fund, and again, it's the COVID-19 Emergency Fund. So again, applications for funding are invited currently from community groups and organisations, again, within our city area. Again, in terms of the structure, it's Galway City Local Community Development Committee, so LCDC. Again, many of you will be familiar with that structure and that committee. And again, under the second round fund, we have been allocated an amount of just over 43,000. So that's 43,029 euro. Again, obviously at national level, you may have heard the larger press releases where it speaks to funding in the tune of 1.7 million. That's obviously the national pot. Unfortunately, we don't have that for Galway City, I am sorry to say, but again, the allocation to the city under this programme is 43,029. Obviously within the programme, and like most programmes that we administer on behalf of the Department of Rural and Community Development, there is a recommendation that we look to ring fence some funding towards small capital grants, and they're grants that we tend to speak about in the order of €1,000 or less. And again, I suppose the aim always with that is that we look to ring fence a certain amount of the funding to support maybe smaller or maybe newer groups, so that they sort of don't get lost maybe within bigger projects that might take up the funding. So again, that's just something to note, that there is the provision there if the need arises, that there is that requirement and that ask for us to look at ring fencing for small capital grants. Again, obviously, as we always say, there is no limit to the number of applications your group can submit. And again, having spoken to many of you and dealt with many of you under previous schemes, you always have a list of projects, which is wonderful. But as I always say, you do need to prioritise those. Again, the fund for the whole city is 43,000. So it's very welcome. But it is a small amount in terms of what we're talking about and in terms of what we're looking to address. So again, I would be saying that if you have a wish list and you have a couple of things that you would like to do, and again, if they speak to this fund, I would be asking you to strongly prioritise that. Because again, it is going to be competitive, and again, there is a limited amount of funding there. And again, we always look to ensure that we have an equal distribution, again, across groups and indeed across the city, just in the interest of fairness. Obviously, applications this time round will be online only. Obviously, like many of you, we are operating a kind of a hybrid and largely remote working for the next couple of weeks. So again, applications, we're not accepting them in paper format. We don't have a paper application. They are online only. And again, the link to the online system is included with these slides. And again, it has been circulated. And again, to note the closing date, it's a couple of weeks out. It's Friday the 5th of February at 4 p.m. And again, I suppose just to note that, again, not within this audience, but again, commercial organisations and indeed individuals aren't eligible to apply for funding. Again, it has to come from a community group or a community organisation. In terms of the eligibility and in terms of what the programme is speaking to, obviously there are sort of three categories, for want of a better word, in terms of what this grant assistance will go towards. And the first one obviously is to look to support community groups to adapt services and operations to fit not necessarily the new COVID-19 reality, because again, we're living with it for quite a period of time. But again, I suppose we are conscious that some groups may only be looking at reopening and reoperating. So again, there is the opportunity and the provision within this programme to provide small funding to those community groups who are looking at putting in place measures to either adopt their presence or their premises, or indeed to adapt how they deliver their service. So they may be looking at running some programs online, they may be looking at putting more information up online, or they may be looking at, you know, changing some of their social supports and how they deliver those. So again, obviously there is a provision within the programme to look at that and to speak to that. Obviously, as we're aware, late last year, the government launched its Keep Well campaign, which is its resilience campaign, which really is focusing on us as individuals and indeed as communities to look after our own physical, our mental and our well-being. And again, within the particular campaign itself, there's a number of particular themes. And again, this particular fund will speak to three of those themes. And again, those three themes, and there's further details included in the slides. But again, they're looking at us all staying connected, looking at us switching off and being creative, and again, at all times, looking at us minding our mood. So there is the opportunity for the community group to look to animate, to put forward a project for their community, for their area, that would speak to one of those three themes. And then finally, and but certainly not least, again, the programme and the funding can be provided to support groups. And again, they're groups that are working with us on a day-to-day basis as part of our community call, with some funding support towards their running costs or their operating costs if needed. So really that's what the focus of the fund is for. Not one of those is any more important than the other. It's just to kind of outline that they are the focuses of the programme, and obviously projects can be eligible within those kind of distinct areas. What's not eligible for funding, and again, obviously, any project that's not within keeping the ethos, anything that's not speaking to one of those three areas that we've spoken about, and obviously then other sort of fees like legal fees, management fees, purchase, feasibility studies. Again, they're not really seen as kind of priority within this programme. So again, any element of those are not eligible for funding. So again, just to note that they're not eligible. So, you know, including them in any shape or form, they will be deemed ineligible at review and assessment stage. In terms of the government's Keep Well campaign, again, and many of you who are working with us through the community call and through the response forum will be very aware of this. Again, it was launched late last year. Again, the aim there is to show all of us, irrespective of our age, our background, or where we live within the city, to look after our physical, our mental health, and obviously our well-being. And again, obviously, and we'll see through national media campaigns and indeed through some of our local media campaigns, again, it's looking at building in particular hints and tips into our daily and our weekly routines. And again, obviously on the government's website, and the link is there, and indeed on our own website, galwaycity.ie, There's resources there are guidelines there's informations there around how we can support each other and support our communities in line with the Keeping Well campaign. And obviously, as I have said, that funding and projects that speak to that campaign, in particular to those three themes, are eligible for funding under this call. And again, just as a prompt, and again, this information, will be circulated just in terms of the Keeping Well campaign. Again, there's a number of themes to that. And again, look at, you'll have seen these are rolling out at a national level on both radio and TV campaigns, and indeed through our own local media, we're highlighting and we're working in partnership with a number of organisations on these. But again, it's all around keeping active, and again, we know our colleagues in the Sports Partnership are leading out on a number and a series of initiatives to see us all through the winter and the spring. Obviously, keeping in contact and again, staying connected with people and looking at building up those social supports, supporting our volunteers. Again, that's all very, very important now more than ever. And again, there's, again, through the community call helpline, there are a number of organisations working with us, providing very practical supports, and also, again, as we're moving through the winter months, looking at providing befriending services and phone services and phone call support. So again, that's all around keeping in contact, and that all speaks very clearly to that particular theme. Obviously, switching off and being creative, again, ourselves, our local libraries across the city, in partnership with our colleagues in Creative Ireland. Again, we're looking at rolling out some national programmes and indeed some local programmes very much at a local level. So again, if your community group, has a particular focus on the arts, creativity, or that particular sector, again, there is that opportunity to put forward a project for funding under this COVID-19 emergency fund. And finally, the last two kind of themes, again, that are under the Keep Well campaign is around us eating well. And again, there's a number of organisations, again, at a national level that are and will be taking a lead in terms of rolling out those campaigns. And indeed, our own colleagues in Healthy Galway City. And again, our Healthy Galway City website is an excellent resource, not only at this stage, but at all stages during the year, in terms of a lot of our Healthy Galway programmes. And again, some of those are speaking to this particular theme of eating well. And then finally, minding your mood. And really, this is kind of working in partnership with our colleagues in the HSE around their resources. And they have many resources in this regard. And also then working with our colleagues in SIPSI around looking at targeting those supports, particularly to children and young people and indeed their families over the coming months. Speaking to the application then itself, again, like I said, it's an online application only. Many of you will be familiar with that if you had worked with us even last year through the Community Enhancement Fund. Again, some of you who maybe didn't work with us last year, you may have been familiar in previous years with us being able to accept paper applications or email applications, but obviously I have to stress that it's an online application only. Again, the form and the system, it is detailed and we accept that, but again, it has been designed to ensure that at every stage only relevant questions are being asked. And again, there is the opportunity, and again, many of you will be familiar with that, of, saving your application, going back to it. You don't have to do it all at once. There is a list of the questions up online, so you can look at those in advance. So you can have your conversations with your group. You can see exactly what the questions are, so that when you do sit down and you do work on the system online, that you are familiar with what's coming up next, and you are as prepared as you can be in line with any application process. Again, like I said, only projects that meet the criteria, again, as outlined above, will be considered. As always, and again, this is the benefit of having such a great and vibrant sector within the city. It is always competitive, and that's welcome. We always get a lot of applications, and they are always of a high quality. So it is going to be competitive. I've no doubt about that. And again, applications again made online. The closing date is Friday the 5th, again at 4 o'clock. And the link there to the online system and that portal is there. Again, I know the GCCN have been sharing that out. And again, if you have any queries in advance, and not necessarily at 3 o'clock on Friday the 5th of February, but I would be asking you to address them in email. And again, the email address is there. So again, after this evening and over the next couple of evenings, go online, have a look at the list of questions, have a think about what the programme is speaking to, have a think about your project, and start to put forward your application. Again, saving it as you're going along if needed, but not leaving it to the last minute. And again, any queries that you have, we're happy to deal with them by email. And again, the email address is there, candc@galwaycity.ie. Just in terms of some of the programme requirements, and again, some of you will be familiar with this, and again, these would be standard in terms of other applications. But obviously, again, it is public funding, and again, obviously, in line with that, we will require quotations or estimates, and they are required at application stage. And obviously, as many of you will be aware, having dealt with us and having been successful in terms of previous funds, we obviously have limits in terms of what we require at procurement stage, which is at buying stage. So again, it's detailed there. So again, for any project that costs less than 3,000, we will be asking you to submit one written estimate or one written quotation. And when we mean written, that's by email, obviously, because again, we're doing this online. Obviously, then, if you're considering putting forward a project that's of a higher cost, so again, for projects that cost between 3,000 and 25,000, again, we are looking for a minimum of 3 written estimates or 3 written quotations. And again, they have to be from independent suppliers, because obviously, and it's in your interest and your group's interest to always go to the market and make sure you're getting the most competitive price for your project. Now, obviously, we are aware that we're in a level 5, we're moving between levels. So again, obviously, there is going to be a degree of flexibility there in relation to seeking quotations. And again, we would ask that in all cases and in all events, evidence will be required that you've sought your quotes. So again, if you've gone to the market, and if by your closing time for whenever you're putting forward your application and you don't have your 3 quotes in at that stage, and your project is, like I said, over the 3,000 and under the 25, you do need to show us the evidence that you went and you sought the quotations again from independent suppliers. Okay, so again, it's the evidence that we will accept at application stage, and that is up to Friday the 5th of February. Again, if you have any queries, I know there's a lot of people on the call and there might be different scenarios, but again, if that's not clear and you have a particular project or you have a particular query and we don't get to answer it this evening, please email the office tomorrow and we will contact you and we can discuss it on a case-by-case basis. That's the broad principle, and that's the broad outline of the flexibility that we can bring into it at this stage. Obviously then, in terms of statutory consents, insurance and acknowledgement of funding, again, it's as it states there. Again, obviously, depending on the type and the nature of the project, I don't think these are going to need permissions, but that's not to say some of them may need permissions in some shape or form. So again, we do look for those, and again, that's before work commences. Obviously, in terms of insurance, we don't require you to have insurance at this stage because you're applying at this stage. But obviously, if you're successful and if we go to application stage and offer stage, we do work through these requirements with you and we do require them to be in place. And then obviously, as always, in terms of the acknowledgement of funding, again, we do require that to be appropriate and in line with your project. So if your project is looking to do something on a website, obviously it'll be to ensure that you have your logos and your acknowledgements on the website. If it's got to do with something physical, we may look at putting in place a small sign. So again, the acknowledgement of funding is required, but again, it will be dependent on the nature and the focus of your particular project. Obviously, match funding isn't required. But again, if your group has match funding in place and you can demonstrate that and confirm that at application stage, that is welcome. But again, it's not a requirement under this particular programme. And then to note in terms of the final deadline, and again, if you're successful, we will notify you of all of these dates, obviously at letter of offer stage. But again, the final date for the drawdown of this funding is the end of August 2021. And that's the absolute final date. But again, we will work with you and we will have to bring that back ever so slightly, a couple of weeks. But again, we will work with you on that. And again, we'll advise you of that if you're successful. Finally, then to note, and again, many of you will be familiar with this and many of you are working with us on this, but again, just to note that the City Community Call is still in place, it is still operating. And again, we are there by free phone 1800 400 150 or by the dedicated email address there to take calls from anyone who is in need of practical supports, or indeed anyone who is in need of other supports or other assistance, or indeed somebody to talk to. Again, we are operating, it's 7 days a week, so it's Monday to Sunday inclusive. So again, you will have seen our flyer, our poster, we're circulating it out on social media and again in local media. So again, it's just to note that we are there, and again, if you can continue to work with us and highlight and promote it, that would be great and very much appreciated as well. That's it for the moment.
Okay, thank you so much, Katrina, for that. It was really comprehensive, but very, very clear.